So how would the authors of text 2 respond to the consensus view discussed in text 1? So what is that consensus? It says that many studies in psychology have shown that people seek out information even when they know in advance that they have no immediate use for it, and that they won't directly benefit from it. Such findings support the consensus view among researchers of curiosity, namely that curiosity is not instrumental, but instead represents a drive to acquire information for its own sake. So a little vocabulary here. Definitely want to make sure you know the meaning of consensus, even though they tell us what it is in this particular case. But consensus, it can mean just a majority or widely held view among a group. Although if you look in the dictionary, it will sometimes say that consensus is like completely shared. But I don't think something has to be completely shared or unanimous in order to qualify as a consensus. It's just the widely held view. And so in this case, curiosity is not instrumental. That's the other word. So to say that it's instrumental, we're not talking about music without vocals here. We're saying, or the idea is that it's not a means to an end. It's not something that exists to serve some other goal or end, but as it says, it is something that represents a drive to acquire information for its own sake. So for its own sake as opposed to some other purpose. So what would the authors of passage 2, or not the author of passage 2, but the researchers described in passage 2 say about that? So while acknowledging that acquiring information is a powerful motivator, this researcher and colleagues ran an experiment to test whether emphasizing the usefulness of scientific information could increase curiosity. They found that when research involving rats and fruit flies was presented as having medical applications for humans, participants expressed greater interest in learning about it than when the research was not presented as useful. Okay, so we've got a connection here between useful and instrumental. And so what are they saying? Well, they are acknowledging, as it says here, that curiosity can be a motivator, just for its own sake, like just wanting to know things. Purpose can increase curiosity. So usefulness can still increase curiosity, even if it isn't totally necessary for the actual creation or presence of curiosity. In other words, somebody can be curious without a particular purpose, but connecting it to some other use can increase that curiosity. So A is just not addressing that point. They're not talking about, determining when something serves no goal. B, by suggesting that curiosity may not be exclusively motivated by the desire to merely acquire information. That is actually going to be our correct answer. So it may not be exclusively motivated by the desire to merely acquire information. So in other words, merely or just acquiring information for its own sake isn't the only thing that can motivate curiosity. So they express greater interest when it was presented as useful. So that looks good, but what about C and D? So by conceding or agreeing or acknowledging, so that kind of looks good if we look at this first word, acknowledging, conceding, but we have to read more than that first word or second word in this case. So they don't say anything about this. I mean, information that serves no immediate purpose only because they think they can use it later. So that's a distinction that's just not made here. It's not about whether it's useful now versus useful later. It's about whether it is presented as being useful or not. So D, by disputing the idea that curiosity can help explain purposeless information-seeking behaviors, and they would not dispute that. They acknowledge it. And so our answer is going to be B.